Thank you for stopping by. I am Jeffrey Weiss, your political activist, keeping you informed of local and world events. Today we discuss, if it looks like slavery, smells like slavery, well, then it probably is slavery. Racism is alive and well in America. Now it is a criminal justice system that targets people of color. Mass incarceration provides a gigantic windfall for the private prison industry, while the nation's unprecedented rate of imprisonment deprives individuals of freedom, wrests loved ones from their families, and drains the resources of governments, communities, and taxpayers. The private prison industry rakes in billions. The United States imprisons more people, both per capita and in absolute terms, than any other nation in the world, including Russia, China, and Iran. Over the past 4 decades, imprisonment in the United States has skyrocketed, spurred by criminal laws that impose steep sentences and curtail the opportunity to earn probation and parole. The current incarceration rate deprives record numbers of individuals of their liberty, disproportionately affecting people of color, and has, at best, a minimum effect on public safety. Meanwhile, the crippling cost of imprisoning increasing numbers of Americans saddles government budgets with rising debt and exacerbates the current fiscal crisis confronting states across the nation. You think that's a crime? No. A crime is paying prisoners $1 a day to work, then $5 a minute to make a call. A crime is creating dozens of more rules for prisoners to abide by than keeping them in prison 76% longer than the same crime than those in state or federal facilities have to endure. Private prison companies essentially admit that their business model depends on high rates of incarceration. There was talk of decriminalizing drug use, taking away mandatory sentencing. What do you think the private prison system did? They said that demand for their facilities and services could be adversely affected by leniency in conviction or parole standards and sentencing practices. Private prisons for adults were virtually non-existent until the early 1980s, but the number of prisoners in private prisons increased by approximately 1,600% from 1990 to 2009. Today, for-profit companies are responsible for approximately 6% of state prisoners, 16% of federal prisoners, and, according to one report, nearly half of all immigrants detained by the federal government. Now do you see why they are so reluctant to legalize immigration and get rid of 3-strike laws and mandatory sentencings? The private prison system is donating, if you want to call it bribing as well, the legislators to vote for legislation in favor of the private prison systems. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, an agency that locks up roughly 400,000 immigrants each year and spends over $2 billion annually on custody operations, now intends to create a new network of massive immigration detention centers managed largely by the private companies. It is the new form of inhumane exploitation in the United States, where up to 2 million, mostly black and Hispanic, are working for various industries for a pittance. For the tycoons who have invested in the private prison industry, it has been like finding a pot of gold. They don't have to worry about strikes or paying unemployment insurance or vacations or comp time. All of their workers are full-time and never arrive late or are absent because of family problems. Moreover, if they don't like the pay of 25 cents an hour and refuse to work, then they're locked up in isolation cells. The list includes the cream of U.S. corporate society: IBM, Boeing, Motorola, Microsoft, AT&T, and lots more. All of these businesses are excited about the economic boom created by the prison system. Just between 1980 and 2010, profits went up from $400 million to $6 billion. Inmates in private penitentiaries generally receive the minimum wage for their work, but in privately run prisons, they receive as little as 17 cents per hour for a maximum of 6 hours a day, the equivalent of $20 per month. Those rates equate to third world labor markets. A company that operated a maquiladora on the Mexican border closed down its operations there and then relocated to San Quentin Prison in California. Some studies have found that private prison inmates lost good behavior time at a rate 8 times higher than those in state prisons did. 97% of the 125,000 federal inmates have been convicted of non-violent crimes. More than half the 600,000 inmates in municipal or county jails are innocent of the crimes they are accused of. Of these, the majority are awaiting trial. 2/3 of the 1 million state prisoners have committed no violent offenses. 16% of the country's 2 million prisoners suffer from mental illness. The American government maintains there is no alternative but to vigorously prosecute their zero-tolerance policy of arresting drug users and their dealers. That has led to the incarceration of over 500,000 Americans for nonviolent crimes. Meanwhile, the flood of illegal drugs into America continues. Simply, it imitates Nazi Germany with respect to forced labor and concentration camps. There are a great many municipalities out there who treat their citizens as cash cows. Tickets, fines, charges for incarcerating them make up as much as 30% of their budgets. This was the case in Ferguson, Missouri in 2012 when Michael Brown was shot 11 times. That year, 86% of the stops, 92% of the searches, and 93% of the arrests were of black people, despite the fact that police officers were far less likely to find contraband on black drivers. This worsened inequality as struggling blacks funded local government rather than the relatively affluent whites did. There were more than 26,000 citations issued in Ferguson that year out of a population of 21,000. That is more than one citation for every man, woman, and child in the city. Mayors, city attorneys, and police chiefs must be of the same racial mix as the population as a whole. This can be done today if we are serious. The bottom line, if you are Mexican, you can expect to die a violent death within a few years. If you are black, expect to spend decades behind bars. But if you are a banker, expect to live a life of luxury and safety. If my articles interest you, please use the link to check out my website and books. Thank you very much.